minutes roughly.
Oh, yeah, about that, and then take questions.
Great.
Yep. All right, so we're letting let folks in right now. Let everybody into the webinar. Welcome to Powerhouse Arena's virtual events. My name is Chris. I'm the events coordinator here. And tonight we're very pleased to be hosting the launch of Everything is Spiritual by Rob Bell. He'll be in conversation with Vanessa Cornell. You can buy copies of the book with signed book plates at powerhousebookstores.com. The link is in the event page, and I'll post it here as well. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and Rob will take your questions at the end of the event, and I'll introduce our speakers right now. Vanessa Cornell is the founder of Nushu, a community for women based in New York. She lives there with her husband and 5 children. Rob Bell is the New York Times bestselling author of 10 books, including Velvet Elvis, Drops Like Stars, and Love Wins, which have been translated into 25 languages. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Kristen, and their 3 kids. I hand it over now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Hi, Zoom virtual book participants. Hi, Vanessa.
Hey, Rob. Thanks, Chris.
I'm so glad there are all these people that we can't see, but who are with us in the strange virtual living room in the sky. Obviously, the world has changed, and so when this book was going to come out, and my publisher said, I can't go around on planes and hotels and such and do like a normal book thing to say you could do a virtual book tour and support your local bookstore. So that's why all you are here is picture us actually in Powerhouse, all packed. I think last time I was there, it was really hot and sweaty, which was fantastic. But they said what you can do is be in conversation with someone. And I had met Vanessa earlier this year and thought, wouldn't it be fascinating? She was one of my people. I thought I should just like this beautiful random assortment of people that I get to meet and know. If I asked them, you want to read my new book and tell me what you think? And then other people will listen in when we talk about it. So that's the premise here. So that's why Vanessa is here, and you read the book, and we haven't talked about it.
No.
So we'll talk about it, and I'm going to find out what you thought or where it took you or if you saw yourself in it and all that. And then at some point, we'll take questions and see what other people want to talk about.
Awesome.
So what'd you think?
First of all, I was so excited to read your book, and I was so honored and thrilled that you asked me to read your book. And, if I saw myself in it, first of all, the answer is yes, right? I mean, there was so much I related to in the book that being raised in the work hard, don't feel generation of parents, the surfing, we talked about that a little bit earlier, that sort of inkling or itch inside, that inner knowing that's trying to communicate with you. The knowing that you're in a place where you can't stay. I really related to that like, I know I can't stay here. I even really related to your, there's this beautiful part of the book, Rob, where you talk about being curled up on the floor of your office.
Oh, yeah.
That moment. I mean, that moment I really, I've had my curled up on the floor of the office moment. And so, there was so much I related to. And I never played in a rock band. And I never preached a sermon to thousands of people in a church. But, I guess I don't have to have done those things to relate to your story. I related to it so deeply, and actually I sort of wept through the whole thing. I think I emailed you at some point and I was like, I'm only halfway through and I've just been weeping through the whole thing. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for sharing it with me. And I related to so much, and it brought out so much in me that wasn't even on an intellectual level. That was just in a pure heart feeling place.
Yeah. That was my way into writing the book. There was it's like I dropped down into my heart, and I came from this tradition that was very much located in its head.
Yeah.
And then, especially when I was starting out, you learn, so you study ancient texts, Greek and Hebrew, and it was studying was the thing, and then you would tell people the stuff it was like a transmission almost, and it was supposed to be heartfelt and meaningful and passionate, but also was easy to be like, I know some stuff, now I'm going to tell you, now you can take notes and know it. And there was something about, as soon as I typed the first line of the book, my grandma used to keep cash in her bra. I was like, what is this? What is this book? Where is this going? Where do I come from? And it became, oh, just tell what it's like to be you and trust that. It's like double down on the particular details of what it's like to be you, and trust that people will find themselves in those particulars.
Yeah. Yeah. The feeling that I had when I read your book was sort of the feeling that I used to get as a kid when I walked into a church or a temple or a place of worship. And you know those things when you're a kid, when you realize like maybe a little too late in life that not everyone had that experience as a kid. And you're like, oh, I thought that's what everyone felt. And then you're like, oh, maybe actually, I don't think so. So now,
what was that feeling? What was the feeling?
Even now when I go into, I'm my friend's kid is having his bat mitzvah and everyone's socializing, and I walk into the temple and I just want to weep. I just want to weep. And I'm crying in the corner, and my husband's like, I don't know what's wrong with my wife. She's crying in the corner.
Because of a sense of holy, a sense of sacred, a sense of a place set apart.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a feeling. I don't even know what to put words to it, but something like that. Something like that. That's what I felt. That's what I felt when I read your book, Rob, is that place of spirit, that place of where it came from. And it was beautiful.
Wow. There's, in the ancient tradition, they talk about that the liturgy, like the writings that people would read when they gather, they called it at a cathedral of words. So the idea that like a poem can be like a cathedral of words, where you enter, the words create a space that you enter into. And so you can read a poem, a novel, a book, and you can repeatedly go into that space and see something different every time, depending on what season of life you are, whether you're grieving, whether you're rejoicing. And I had that sense when I was with the book, like the book is like a space that people will enter into, and they'll see whatever it is maybe they need to see in this moment.
Yeah. And it's sort of, it was interesting for me to have that feeling and relate it to the feeling I had when I was in a space. I was like, oh, interesting. What's this about? And one of my favorite lines from your book is when you talk about the real crisis. You say the real crisis at the heart of humanity is a lack of imagination. And the reason I mention that is because, we think of these traditional forms, right? The building, the book, the rituals, the containers, the way we think of how the spirituality, how the sort of search for the answers to those big questions have to be contained. And I was like, oh, this is like a container, just like that building is a container for that feeling. And it elicited the same thing in me.
Oh, that's fascinating. Oh, wow. Yeah. And even right now, like this past 6 months with the world heading into whatever it's heading into, you see so many of things are being questioned about how the world is. Even like in lockdown, what is a life when all of a sudden a number of things you can't do?
Yeah.
Or what is school when your kid is like on their laptop? Like the forms are like crumbling just a bit. You can see it, like people asking all sorts of new questions, which once again, imagination. Where are we headed? Fascinating.
It's almost like there are no more rules.
Yes.
And the rules that have remained are like optional.
Right. Everything's way more malleable.
Which in some ways is really freeing. But I think on balance, people don't see it as freeing. I think people feel panicked, right? Because that freedom is is really scary. And I think it's something you talk about too, right? Is that not having someone give you the answers
Right.
is
Right.
freedom, but I don't know that everyone wants that freedom.
Right. There's this ancient pattern of orientation. Then there's a disruption, a collapse. You hit the wall, the crash. So it's orientation, then disorientation, because the standard reference points aren't there anymore. Where is the solid ground? Where is the lights that show me which way? Orientation, disorientation, and then reorientation. And like right now, we're in this massive disorientation. But I just want to tell everybody I see, this is all an ancient pattern. Like this has happened before. It's happened lots of times. It's how you get to a new world. It's how you get to something better, is orientation, and in disorientation, the human impulse often is to go back to what was previously orienting. Just make this thing great again. Whatever you do, just try and recapture past perceived glories, because at least then, like you said, it was stable. But the universe goes forward. That's where all the new life is. And you can see so many right now. I just want to, come on, hang in there. This is an ancient pattern. There's a reorientation. We'll get there. It's okay. Whew. Okay, let's talk about your book. What are the yellow pieces in it?
So I'm a note taker. I'm a write things in the margin, yellow things, passages I love. You want me to tell you my favorite passage? Because
when you're a writer, you spend forever all alone typing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you just assume, well, you hope somewhere out there someday it'll go in the world and somebody will engage with it.
Yeah.
So actually seeing a copy of it in person is already amazing to me. But then you have like scratches. I just want to know what you scratched.
Okay, I'm going to tell you.
This is always the interesting stuff.
So
to me.
this is what it looks like, when I read.
You're serious. You're serious.
Yeah. All right. So you want to know my favorite passage?
Yes, Vanessa. What's your favorite passage?
All right. It's the passage about gospel.
Oh, yeah.
Should I read it to you?
Sure.
Gospel is the divine announcement that you are loved and accepted exactly as you are, that everything has been taken care of, that everything you've been striving to earn has been yours the entire time, that you belong in exactly this condition that you are currently in, nothing additional required or needed.
Oh, that's good. I like that part.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Who wrote that?
Oh my goodness.
Love that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the basis of all of my work and my faith system.
Yeah. Tell me, you started New Shoe how long ago?
I started New Shoe a couple of years ago, and it's really evolved. And in this current iteration, I basically put people together in a circle, and we hold space for each other and share what's in our hearts and in our minds, and we just receive it with love. That's it. That's all I do.
Where did you get the idea? Where did you get that idea?
I mean,
it's obviously but it's also revolutionary.
Yeah.
It's old and new.
Right. It's so simple that I actually questioned at one time, am I really even doing something? It's so simple. I just, as these things go out of your own experience, you search for, how do I do the thing I'm supposed to do in my life? And I had a moment of, being curled up on the floor, and then I started to learn and grow and expand, and I wanted people around me, and I wanted teachers. I brought in all these teachers and speakers and experts to a circle of women, and they were great, and they taught us a lot. But then I realized, no, it's actually the circle of women together, holding space, listening to each other, giving permission for people to say things out loud. That's the thing. Not the teachers, the speakers, the experts. That's the thing. That's so powerful and revolutionary.
So as like less speakers, teachers, more everybody comes, sits in a circle.
Yeah.
And then how's it start?
So it starts with guidelines, basically a contract, right? So we set up a space of permission, and then we say, here's our contract with each other. I agree not to judge you. I agree to tell the truth. I agree to hold this confidentially. I agree I won't manage your experience. And we basically set up a space where we say, you know, when you're trying to get to know somebody, there's so many unknowns. There's so many, can I trust this person? Does this person want to hear it? We basically say, like, this is the place. This is the place. We want to hear it. We want to hear it. But then in exchange, you're going to hear what the other people have to say. And that's it. It's not that complicated.
But when you started doing this, it must have felt new and like, oh my God, what is happening here?
Yeah, it did. It did.
Were there moments where you were like, what have we unleashed? Like, is this?
There's still moments like that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if I'm not sort of like, oh, I'm not so sure this is new territory, then I'm not pushing myself, you know?
Yeah.
But there's this fundamental trust that I have in what the circle can hold. That's actually beyond my control. You know, it's made up by the input, the energy, the commitment, the love of everyone. And people are more powerful than they can possibly know in that space.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
they feel it and they experience it. And, you know, I try not to explain it too much.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Right. When I was 25, I got my first job in a church, and I had two suits, a tan suit for the summer and a black suit for the winter. So I put on my suit and I go to church. And after one of my first sermons, this older gentleman comes up and he says to me, everything you need to know about being a pastor, you would learn by going to AA. You should start going to AA.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I'm not aware that I have an alcohol problem. And he said, no, you just need to go to AA. And it was in the basement of this church. So upstairs, suit, orchestra, 100-person choir, like big production.
Yeah.
And then the AA was in the basement with bad coffee, exactly as it's supposed to be. And so I would start going to these AA meetings. And then when they come to me, he said, when they come to you, just say, hi, I'm Rob, and I pass. So I started going to these AA meetings, and I'd be sitting there in the meeting. And I remember the first couple ones, I couldn't figure out why it was such a different space than any space I'd ever been in. And it finally, like, it just was like the scales fell from my eyes. It was like, oh, everybody in this space is here because they have no more energy to pretend. That the thing upstairs is like a giant show. And the premise upstairs is here's what you need to do to get to this better place. And downstairs, it's just pure, naked, undiluted, this is who I am in this moment. And I'm just trying to get through today.
And I think the other thing about AA is there's no fixer and fixees.
Right. And that nobody was allowed to tell. It was just, you're going to tell your story. Okay. It was like the pure materiality of just the facts is the only thing here. How are you feeling today? What's it like to be you today? And everybody just had to go, okay. Yeah. Oh, and that I realized the gospel in that of nothing upstairs is getting you any points.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, all of this effort upstairs isn't getting anybody anywhere. But this absolutely raw confessional space where everybody just is where they are is actually the thing, counterintuitively.
And what I found is that the saying of it out loud is something really important and powerful. The sort of putting it out there in words and being witnessed and just saying what is starts to transform something. I can't even really describe it, but
Yeah.
something happens when you say it out loud and you're witnessed, in terms of your relationship with whatever it is you're sharing, whatever it is you're saying.
Do you know when you go to, like, if people go to one of your groups, do you know when you go to the group what you're going to say? Are you like, oh, I'm just going to unload this one, or I'm just going to be present and see what happens?
I mean, I give people prompts. So I give people prompts to be able to help them sort of have a framework for what to say. But what happens is some people answer the prompts and some people go totally off script because it's just the thing they need to say. And I say to you, if you want to go off script and there's just something you need to share, that's cool. You know, because sometimes that thing has been in there for so long, it just needs to be said.
See, it's so fascinating to me how in New York City, in one of the centers of the world, in this highly advanced, technological, sophisticated, educated society, you're like gathering to sit in a circle and just say the thing that needs to be said, and that's the thing that like tilts people's worlds. Like this ancient practice is like what's actually the new thing. That's amazing. Okay, do I get to see more highlights from the book?
Oh yeah, more highlights from the book. Okay, so do you want to know who my
Thank you for indulging me. Thank you for indulging me. It's so enjoyable.
If your book were a novel, my favorite character has got to be Sister Virginia.
Oh my goodness, with the sensible shoes, maybe Velcro.
You know, a nun in street clothes. I mean,
Yes,
that's just
with a Boston accent.
perfect. A nun in street clothes. I want to know more about Sister Virginia.
Oh, I have a Sister Virginia story that you would like. Yeah, so to everybody, to people, the participants here, to our friends, in the book I tell the story about hearing that some friends of mine are like, you have to go meet this woman, Sister Virginia. She's a school sister of Notre Dame. I don't know what that means, but she does spiritual direction. And so I was just not doing that well. I could use all the help I could get. So I go and make an appointment with her to find out what spiritual direction is. And I sit down with this wonderful woman in probably her late 60s, and she's dressed like my Aunt Dorothy in wonderful, sensible black shoes, probably with Velcro tabs. And she has this Boston accent, and she said, so why are you here to talk to me? And so I start telling her all my problems and things I have to fix and people who are getting into my skin, and she has zero interest in fixing into my problems. And she just couldn't care less about helping me get rid of these tensions and angst. She just keeps stopping me and just saying, why? Why is that a problem? Why do you think that's something to be fixed? Why do you think that's something to be solved? And it's so maddening to me, and yet unbelievably liberating, because she's suddenly like, wait, what is that? What is that? And instead of good, bad, win, lose, success, failure, she's like interested in this thing that's in all the messes, which she calls spirit. And she just keeps insisting something's happening. So I would leave these appointments with none of my problems fixed, but with this awareness of something happening in the midst of all the messes, that she just completely, it was like it's like a door to a whole new room. So here's the story not in the book. So I said to her, hey, sometime we should, you and me, why don't you come to the church where I preach and we'll do a sermon together. We'll like tag team together. And because I thought it'd be so much fun to introduce everybody to her. And she said, okay. And then she contacted me right before we were going to do it and said, I can't have you tell anybody I'm going to be there. Just have to have me be a surprise person. I said, why? And she said, because the head nun had found out that she was going to come do this thing with me and was jealous. And so she had like politicking she had to do. And I was like, oh my God, you can be like a nun, a school sister. You know where I'm going with this. You can like give your life to selflessness, to poverty, to all these noble truths. And yet nuns are still throwing elbows. They're still like a little sister's got a little edge, get so-and-so. There's a little, you know what I mean? You can like give yourself to the purest path, and there's still, someone's got a little chip, someone's a little jealous, someone. Oh my goodness. Sister Virginia, you're right. if there are these various characters, she would steal the thing.
Yeah, she's amazing. Well, I mean, you're a pretty good character in the book too. I mean, there's so many moments where you're in that place of, yeah, I probably, like, if I did this, I might rifle some feathers. Yeah, these people aren't going to be so happy if I do this or say this, but I think I'm going to do it anyway.
We have to keep going. There's certain things that if you name them in communicating, you ruin it. It's like they're actually the things you're communicating, but they're like just below the surface.
Yeah.
And there was this feeling that was almost like imprinted into the book of just keep going. Like, whatever it is, you're going to be fine. There's something happening in all of it. I wanted people, as the story progresses and we kind of just keep going, people to have this wonderful sense of the embarrassing, awkward, strange, debilitating, painful. It's okay. It's all part of this wondrous experience that you're having here.
Yeah. I've often felt this sense of, I mean, there's really only one direction.
Yeah.
So I can't really fight it. I might as well just go with it.
Yes. Yes. Just surrender to it and it's way more fun.
Yeah.
And then if it's just all falling apart, I think there's one story I tell about how it just didn't go that well. And I was like, man, I might work in a book someday, which is so meta.
Well, here's the line. Spirit is often lurking in whatever it is you most dislike. I like that line too.
Yeah. I wanted that. I kept adding these things about people, the people who drive you crazy, the people who get under your skin. I think there's a thing about the person who annoys you the most. If you see them as your teacher, apparently they're here to teach me something.
Yeah.
And the moving from the dualities and the binaries of you and them and friend and enemy to all these parts exist within a whole. And if you can begin to see it as a whole, and so this person who everything within you wants to push away, you start asking, what are they here to show me? What are they here to teach me? Suddenly within the parts, you're taking part in the whole, and life gets way more interesting. It gets so much more interesting.
I think another thing I felt in the book that maybe you didn't explicitly say is there was just always a part of you that knew. Maybe you had to like find your way there, but there was a part of you that knew when you were sitting with your fellow megachurch pastors and they were saying, no, Rob, Rob, this, you're not doing it right. You got to do this. You got to do this. These are the rules. These are the rules, Rob. Rules of the road. And there was a part of you that was like, no.
That's not how it's going to go for me. Yeah. I remember a pastor telling me that he had the name of his church written on the roof of the building. So when planes flew overhead, people could see, and just being like, points for creativity, but that just like would never cross this is like not a world. I don't want to know how to think that way. So bless you, but I'm going to go do this thing over here.
Well, that's Rob, that's the first thing that you taught me among many things. I saw your story and you had, had this very successful church and then you decided to leave. And I didn't know that much about it. I know so much more now about your story reading the book. But I thought, oh, like, we're not trapped.
Yeah.
No one's trapped.
Right.
Success. No, we always get to choose.
Yes. And there's this subtle move. It's like deep in the heart from disempowerment to empowerment. Mm-hmm. It's like and the needle is like maybe a millimeter from here to here. It's like deep in the center of a person's being. that when it moves from it's happening to me to I happen to it. And in my experience, and especially accomplished, wealthy, educated, what oftentimes still, no matter how much success, quote unquote, a person has had, oftentimes you can pick it up at like it's like a very subtle energy. Even people who would appear to be incredibly empowered, still in there, you can feel it. Oh, this thing is still happening to them. And this move from disempowered to empowered. Nope, you always have options. Always. Always. There's always something that can be done.
Yeah.
Even the choice of how you're going to respond to the thing that is out of your control is an issue of disempowerment and empowered. And it's like if you can find it and just make the one tilt, like I've noticed with the pandemic, and this thing is happening to all of us that is out of our control at some level, just people finding the tiny little bit that they do have, a tiny little switch to, no, I do have options here. Even if it appears like I have none, there's some. Even if it's just how I respond to not having as many options. That's empowerment.
Yeah.
And it's like these tiny little moves that are actually how the whole thing turns.
Yeah. And letting go of thinking you ever really had control, right? I mean,
My kids and I laugh about the past 6 months. In these uncertain times, no, they've always been uncertain. There's just a whole level of honesty now and apparentness to the uncertainty. It's always been uncertain.
Yeah. Do you want to take a couple questions, Rob?
Absolutely. Pick ones you like.
All right. Let's talk about, I mean, we just talked about the pandemic, this modern moment of disorientation. Can you describe another moment of disorientation like this one? What pattern should we compare this to that isn't an ancient history? What's a more recent sort of disorientation that you can relate it to?
Oh, I remember the Sunday after 9/11 when I was, so I would have been 31, and beyond the normal numbers of people, like people were coming, we had Sunday church service and like thousands more than the normal thousands. Like people were sitting on the floor. It was like, what happened to us? And I remember there was the shock of that, the loss of life and a terrorist attack on US soil. But also I remember in the air was revenge. So, because that was a Tuesday, I believe. So like 5 days later, the shock, people were still in the shock, but there also was revenge in the air. You could feel it, like justice, the need to get these people. And I remember talking about the shock, talking about the desire for justice, but talking about larger questions of who are we in the world? Why did this, not just they did something bad, yes, obvious, but who is the US in the world, and the larger question of tribes and how tribes move in the world. And this is, yes, justice, but also how does the world work? Oil, violence, weapons. And I remember it being this massive time of disorientation and knowing that there seemed to be these two responses. You could feel them in the air. The one was, we have to ask larger questions about who America is in the world. And then there was this other response, which is red, white, and blue. These colors don't run. Double down on the flag. Nobody messes with me. Let's go kill everybody who, and I remember feeling this is so ancient. And I don't know if people, I remember being like the need to go do something to somebody. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. The disorientation. And now like the whatever trillions of dollars that those Iraq and Afghanistan wars, there's like a general, like, that wasn't the best response, but you could feel it in the air. Yeah, that was massive disorientation. Yeah, so we've had these, but nothing like this one.
What do you feel in the air right now, the sort of collective? I mean, there's definitely a fear body, a collective fear body.
Absolutely.
But I've also seen sort of an unprecedented need for people to sit with themselves during this time.
Yes.
Really interesting.
Yeah, so a number of the normal modes of stimulation and distraction and numbing are not available.
Yeah.
So the ability to sit with what is, we have such incredibly highly dialed numbing devices. There's always something you can watch. There's always somewhere you can go, and all that motion and movement can distract from just being present with what is within yourself. And how many people in the modern world don't know how to sit in calm quiet with themselves? It's panic.
People are not psyched about it.
Right. Like in our neighborhood, well, obviously in New York as well, the restaurants can do it if they do it, like, can serve if they do it in the parking lot.
Mhm.
And like there's a restaurant like a couple of houses from our house that people are sitting on the concrete, the blacktop. They're just at a nice table on the blacktop. And the evening we walk the dog and we see people, and the picture is like, you're just so desperate to get out, which I totally get. But like, if you got a picture of it and was like, how much did that meal cost? Because you're just a table on a blacktop. But the invitation to be okay with yourself without any stimulation, without, obviously all ancient wisdom traditions are about the vast expanse opening up within you.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating. Learning how to be okay with quiet and with what is, and to actually feel all the feels. Because this thing like demands you feel it. You know that feeling? I'm sure you've had that where you're like, okay, today I'm feeling all the feels in the air. And if I don't just feel it, then I'm pushing it down and it'll come up in some other way.
Yeah, I mean, the only way through is through.
Right. And how much of the modern world is how much of the internet is designed to go around.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no, here's another stupid thing somebody said on Twitter, and look at what somebody else is saying, and look at how somebody else has an opinion about what they like. Oh, good. There's 17 minutes right there.
Yeah.
Telling my friend, look what so-and-so said. Like, there we go. Another 17 minutes of just ruminating on the insanity of someone else, which is insanity, and not finding heart center. Yeah, there's like an invitation lurking in all this.
So I'm going to ask another question and sort of add on to the question. The question is, what elements of current Christianity are most encouraging and most concerning to you? And I'm going to throw in one question of my own, which is, because I've really thought about this, what does it mean to you when you say I'm a Christian? Or what does that mean?
Right. Yeah, I couldn't care less about Christianity. I never have. Like the idea of like a big bulky thing.
Yeah.
Or even, I don't know what current Christianity, I don't even know what that means, honestly. Is that the president? Is that Serbian Orthodox? Is that Latin American Pentecostal? Is that us having this conversation? Like, I don't even know what they're talking about. I'm rooted in this tradition, this Jesus tradition, as a path, a nonviolent, generous, compassionate way of living in the world, where you love your enemies, and that dissolves the category of enemy. So that is like a center for me. That's a way, a path, truth that grounds me. It centers me. I love the story of the cross as the end of violence. To me, that's a story. Can you forgive everybody who's wronged you? And can you not keep all the violence in circulation? And bear it in some way that you become larger and more transcendent and loving. So these are, now the question does have some really interesting edges to it. And I would say that for a lot of people, their understanding of the Christian faith was about getting people in, was about how do you get people to think this or believe this or join your whatever. And that's actually the first stage of religions, is they try to figure out who they are and then try to get people in. But then a religion grows up. Historically, a religion matures and it realizes it has gifts to give the world. So for me, this tradition that I come from, which is why I talk about, you've heard me talk about Greek and Hebrew words and tell these stories. It's a gift. Does this help? Does it help you be more human? And so as a particular expression of faith, it will only survive if it can shift from endlessly trying to get people to play by its rules to a big, generous, open-hearted gift to the world. So my work is about what it means to be human. And then what I do is draw on this tradition that I'm grounded in and say, actually, there's a way of naming this that I think is really helpful. Oh, there's a story that I found frames this beautifully. Do you know what I mean? It becomes like a big, generous gift. And I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see more and more people realize that that's the path forward, is the big, generous gift to the world.
Well, I'll never forget. My husband comes home from work, and I've just gone through this real sort of struggle with myself, my, on the floor of the office moment. And I'm really lit up. And he's like, "What is it? Tell me, what is it?" I said, I've got it. I want to be a priest. And I mean, the look on his face, Rob, he was like, I know I sort of thought you'd lost your mind, but now I really think you've lost your mind. And I was like, no, like, hear me out. I never really understood why anyone would want to be a priest. I was raised Christian-ish, but not really. I never got it. It never made sense to me.
Yeah.
I said, I want to lead a life of contemplation, personal contemplation. I want to help other people on their path. And I want to hold people in community. Right? I mean,
very priestly.
Sort of like being a priest. And
sure.
And he was like, so I said, no, I'm not going to go do that thing in an organized religion, but like, that's what I want to do in the world. That's what I want to do with my life. I figured it out. And he was like, all right, I don't know about you.
But this is actually, and I am seeing this all over, people realizing that there's a priestly dimension to what they do. This is how it works, is you realize you're going to create a space where people can experience a different ordering of the world. The third book in the Bible, Leviticus, which is always laughed at because it's so obtuse and hard to access, is all about how does the world get ordered. And there's this group of priests, and they're the ones who create an alternative space that people can come into that gives people another understanding of how the world can be arranged. Justice, equity, beauty, rhythm, order, aesthetics. And that's what the priests, and they sort of have a vision of how it could be, but then they hold it in tension with how the world actually is. And so they're sort of, they bear that and invite people into the space that's been created. And the number of people I meet who articulate some version of this. Yeah. So welcome to the deal. Tell your husband it happened a long time ago. That horse is already out of the barn.
And I think that, one of the things I think I'm responding to is that there are containers, right, that people associate really only with organized religion, right? Traditions and rituals and containers and frameworks.
Right.
And without those spaces, without those, we gather once a week and take a moment out of our lives and set apart time as sacred and value community, they feel untethered.
Yes. Yeah, unmoored. Yeah, life like disintegrated. Like life just spreads out in all these different directions. So going back to the person's question, I'm still back to the person's question because it's such a good one the more I think about it. The power of a path or even a lineage or a faith tradition is that it does anchor you in some way. Poems, prayers, rituals. And the degree to which it does that, it'll never not be incredibly vital.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's do another one. This is fun.
All right, great.
I'm always fascinated to see what people want. It's never not fascinating to me what people want to talk about.
Oh, I love this question. I'm a first-year seminary student in Columbus, Ohio. Do you have any advice for me as I work on becoming a pastor in a mainline Lutheran church someday?
What's the person's name?
Jaron Summers.
Jaron. Okay, Jaron. I love it. Okay, first off, Jaron, I'm assuming that you are in seminary because something within you wants to help people dance with the great mysteries. How's that sound? So let's just assume whether you end up in an actual robe in a building, getting a paycheck from a institution or a denomination, or whether you end up selling cars, something within you knows you're here to help people. So let's just get that let's just make sure that we know that it could take you in this tradition you're in, it could take you out of this tradition. You see what I'm doing there, Vanessa? Is just helping Jaron see, you don't know where this is going to take you, but that sense that you're here to do this is bigger and deeper and wider than any one particular expression or form to that. So I would add to that, the second thing is to develop some rhythm of life now, where I would call it a Sabbath rhythm, where you're on and you're off, you're engaged, you're disengaged, you're in the middle of it, and then you withdraw from it. Some sustainable way of living so that 5 years from now, you'll have more energy, more vitality, more ideas, so that 10 years, 15 years from now, you'll love people more. And oftentimes people get into seminary, it becomes a head game, all the stuff you know, and then it becomes an endless sort of serve, and it feels selfish to take care of yourself. You got to start with yourself. So I assume at your seminary they have a class which is just an airline attendant reminding you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before anybody else. Because if you don't have that sense that the way that you love everybody is you first love yourself, then you end up one more statistic, one more seminary burned out person, but you're listening to us talk, so you're already way ahead of where I was. Welcome to the gig.
We're welcoming more and more people to the gig.
Just come on to the gig. Yeah, but it's quite exciting. Yeah, in the book, Jaron, I tell about seminary and about a story about butterflies. And so I hope that part of the book gives you a sense of what it was like for me. But yeah, it's fantastic. I love it that you're doing this.
I have another question that's sort of related to this sort of oxygen mask, not just for students in seminary, but everyone. Jonathan writes, isn't it inexcusable to focus on our own spiritual issues? We have the virus, a hurricane, wildfires, corruption, economy. Is it inexcusable to focus on our own spiritual issues, Rob?
Inexcusable? Inexcusable?
Inexcusable.
No, it's absolutely first and foremost of paramount importance, because outward consciousness is always a reflection of inward consciousness. So you cannot solve these larger problems of a broken world when there's internal brokenness. The internal flows to the external. So now more than ever, you can't solve economic crises without dealing with internal states of greed and mindsets of scarcity and lack that drive systems of competition that actually wreck everybody's hearts so that they can't participate in the generous bounty of the earth. So no, actually right now, first and foremost, and by spiritual, because everything is spiritual. If by spiritual you mean esoteric, disconnected from this world, no, by spiritual I mean each one of us listening to spirit guiding us, which will always guide us into service. So actually what we need right now with these issues is spirit leads you into an awareness of love for neighbor, which is why you wear a mask. Spirit is what activates a sense that you have something to give. So you're opening your home to somebody who's fleeing from theirs because of forest fire. Spirit is what draws you to call somebody who you think may be stuck inside for days on end and needs somebody to help them feel like they're not alone. So that's what we mean by spiritual, is it's an active energy that catalyzes you to serve and actually enter the game. Yeah. And that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, is for so many people, they have a warped, destructive view of spiritual. That for many people, spiritual life means some sort of vague, esoteric thing happening in a person that's kind of disconnected with life. But politics obviously is spiritual. Economics is spiritual. Education is spiritual. Spiritual is the depth of all of life. So there are a number of traditions that actually gave people a very destructive view of the world because it isolated the world from its own depths. So you have people who are just working a job and call it just a job, or they say, I'm just a mom, or I'm just a citizen. No, this is, the divine is in this place and we weren't aware of it until now. So spiritual is the activating, beautiful, catalyzing, animating energy that wakes us up to who we are and what we're here to do, and always leads us into greater service and action for others. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's a whole book about this, which I'm so glad it's now out.
All right, you want to take
What
another?
else? Yes, let's do. We got a couple minutes more. So much fun.
An anonymous attendee says, I'm working on a new project. I'm learning a new skill because mastery takes time and it's one step forward, two steps back. I have inspiration, then I go into a hole where I feel like I'm a fraud and I should quit. Is this just what being a creator feels like? Does it get easier?
What a great question. So depends on what you're making, anonymous. Dear anonymous, something within you, it sounds like, is demanding expression. Something is speaking to you. It's like, make me. I want to be in the world. So you're listening to that and you're following it. So the great American architect Louis Kahn, when he would design a house, would begin by saying, what does this building want to be? So one of the things that can be incredibly helpful is to ask of this thing that you're making, anonymous, what does it want to be? It's almost like you enter into a relationship with it. It's like you talk to it. So what's hidden in your question is an adversarial relationship with it. You can feel the subtle energies of your question are you against the thing, almost like a wrestling match. So the real invitation here is to shift your energies from a thing to be conquered, a thing to be muscled, a thing to be coerced. Try shifting it to something that wants to be born, and you're coming alongside of it in like nurturing love. Like, hey, what do you want to be? How can I help you? So sometimes you shift your image or your metaphor or the analogy, and then today we'll listen to it a little more. So there's compelling energy, which draws you towards something. Impelling energy is energy that comes up from within. So it's like what you're doing, the invitation for you, anonymous, is to listen to the impelling energy of this project. What's contained already within the idea? And then you're like coaxing it out. Can you see how that's like a totally different way to relate to it? So today, we got a little bit out. Tomorrow, we'll get a little bit more. So instead of one step forward, you see how one step forward, two steps back immediately places tremendous weight on the time you spend with it. So it puts it in a transactional relationship. Did I get anything out of this time? As opposed to, oh, look what we learned about it today. So for example, this book, Everything is Spiritual, I worked on it for months and then just walked away because I was like, there's no book here. I'm probably done writing books. Because I needed to sink farther down into my heart And then when I found it through a bizarre set of circumstances, it's like I found it in a totally different way. So I don't think that the earlier efforts were wasted. They were just all part of it. So for you, one step forward, two step back implies some of the process is useful, some of it isn't, instead of all of the process is part of it. See how that already feels better? Oh yeah, but by you, of course, you get better because you're like building muscles. You get much better. I also just told you about my 11th book that spent 3 or 4 months accomplishing nothing. So you get better at realizing that the rubbish stuff is all part of it.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me earlier, Rob, how did you get to where you are? It was like small moments of crystal clear clarity, like, yes, this is what I'm doing. And then being plunged into what the hell am I doing? Maybe I screwed it all up. I'm totally on the wrong track. That was a terrible idea. And then just sitting with that and being like, no, it's just a course correction. This is just like I was over here, but something about that didn't feel right. I need to be here. And then like, oh, I've got it. I'm clear. I've got the path. It's like the next 5 years are clear ahead of me. And like 2 weeks later, like, oh, shoot. Totally confused again. I'm totally. What am I
Anonymous, so true. Dear Anonymous, there's a story in the book about me wearing a suit with a sweater under the suit and bombing in New York City. That is for you. So I give you that story to tell you it's all part of it.
Any live events scheduled for 2021?
Yes. Oh, yeah. There's a whole world tour, but we'll see. I think we announce Australia and New Zealand in the next couple of weeks, but you all know in these days everything gets announced with a open-handed we shall see. Yeah. So this is all wonderful, but at some point I assume we'll go back to live rooms, which is a bunch of people in a room, one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
So there's a whole giant tour planned, but we shall see.
Do you want to take one more?
Yes.
So I love this question because I know you're a dad and I'm a mom, and parenting is spiritual. Let me tell you, parenting is spiritual.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So the question is, words of wisdom for how to raise children well with the everything is spiritual attitude. I'm quoting Desiree.
Oh, Desiree. Yeah, it's all part of it. You're showing your kids, because your kids are watching. They're watching. So instead of trying to teach them stuff, you're living, they're watching you. So they're already picking up a world of things. So how we handle the angst and weirdness and twists and turns of life is the gift we give them. So here's an example, Desiree. Was it Desiree, right? Here's an example, Desiree. Sometimes with a live audience, I'll ask everybody a series of questions. So I'll say to the live audience, when you were growing up, did you want to have a marriage like your parents had? And every single audience, everybody has a yes or a no. So when you were growing up, did the message that you received from your parents, was it that life is an adventure that you get to go on or a trial to be endured? Everybody in every audience ever has instant yes or no. Or here's one. When you observed your parents getting older, did it feel like they kept growing younger as they grew older? Or did it feel like at some point they settled? And what's fascinating to me is everybody always has answers to those questions. So without saying anything, without your parents saying one word, you picked up a whole world of positive or negative about how to live. So I actually think all questions of parenting are about our stuff, how we're living. But the gift we give our kids is we work out our stuff obviously you make lunches and don't play in the street and all the basics, but I think the gift you give them is you're more alive and vital than ever. I did an event a couple of years ago, and this woman was lovely. She's like, but I'm kind of rethinking a number of things, and I've got more questions than answers. Should my kids know that? I was like, oh, what a gift to give them, that you're figuring it out and you're figuring it out again. Yeah, man, is there any better gift you can give them? So, yeah, what an amazing thing to have. Sometimes I'll think we made human beings. Oh, by the way, Desiree, last night my son Preston read the new book and then told me what he thinks about it. And so that's I think Book Soup is going to release the video of that. And then yesterday we released my podcast, the Robcast, but I'm not on it the first time ever. It's my son Trace talking with my wife Kristen. The two of them had a conversation about the book. So I just listened to it actually yesterday. I like listen to my own podcast that I wasn't on, that was my son and wife talking about the book. So that's what I think about being a parent. Those boys, that's what I think about.
But it's also, Rob, it's that look on your face when you talk about interviewing your son, right? That just like wonder and awe.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of times as parents, we get caught up in the lunches and the this and the schoolwork and the forget to sort of create enough space to just be like, oh my gosh, these creatures we've created, so surprising and unique, and delightful,
and they're in like your house, my house, Desiree's house. We have them in our house. They live with us. So like it's in there. They watched us in traffic. They watched us handle money. They saw how we dealt with people who had boundary issues. Like the whole thing, when it's like, I don't have to teach my kid. Too late. The whole thing is a teaching thing. So let's just get rid of that boundary and enjoy the fact that we get to live with them and they're picking up a world of stuff. What an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Well, Powerhouse said an hour and 3. Vanessa, there he is. Wherever he was, he came back.
Yeah, I've been here. Yeah, thank you. I have to say, I mean, part of why I love hosting you here, Rob, is that I grew up in West Michigan. And
No way.
You at Mars Hill with my friends is really important in expanding my idea of possible and, you know, what spirituality can be outside of the Reformed tradition. And so hearing you articulate these ideas tonight was super meaningful. And,
oh, wow. That's going old school. That's amazing.
where I grew up. So yeah, I hope it was meaningful for everybody else too. And
great.
Thank you so much.
Vanessa, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks, Rob.
Yes.
Thank you for showing me your underlining.
And thanks everyone who joined.
Yeah, if anybody in the audience missed any of it, we'll have it on YouTube soon. So thank you.
Great. Much loved, everybody. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Vanessa. Bye-bye.